Serious therapists of Reddit, what are some red flags we should look for in therapists?
I think there is a misconception that advice giving is what is most helpful. Therapists don't often give advice, but rather they offer alternative perspectives and create space for a collaborative approach to explore new ways of overcoming obstacles. We, as therapists, shouldn't ever assume we know what is best for a client to do. It is their life. If you have a therapist telling you what to do, I would have to assume there is an unhealthy power dynamic occurring which can have a variety of negative outcomes. Of course there is a time and place for advice, but usually that should come from a peer or family who are essentially at the same power level as you.
It's annoyingly true. My therapist flatly refuses to give me a checklist of what I should do with my life that she can then grade, and then I'll know how close to perfect I am. Apparently, that's frowned upon. Haha. The thing is, she very well could have said, do A, B and C and that will fix this, and I would have gone with it and not actually grown at all. Instead, because she's good at her job, she doesn't, and she helps me figure out what I need on my own. It's a lot harder but infinitely more helpful.
If they immediately try to present you with answers to all of your problems, not lead you to your own solutions. There is a major distinction there.
I went to the first initial therapy session. I explained that I had just broken up with my boyfriend, transferred from what I thought was my dream school to a local school, and was considering going back to the first school, and how lonely I was. She told me that the initial therapy session was just to talk about my goals but was not a legit session. The only thing she told me to prepare for next session was to look at college majors between the two schools. I came back the next session, ready with all my school information about what majors stood out to me, and she berated me for still feeling unhappy and lonely and seemed pissed that I didn't do any self-work in the week between the initial consultation and the first real session. She kept saying therapy isn't magic, and that if I wanted to see results, I needed to put in the work outside the session. We didn't even get into the actual therapy yet. She insisted I only wanted to go back to my original school because it's a party school and I wanted to party. Not true at all. Told me I was an enabler because I was okay with my ex being tipsy around me, even though we also agreed that he's not an alcoholic. Told me that I made a lot of mistakes. It scared me away from therapy for a year. I finally went back to free counseling sessions offered through my university, and my new therapist was absolutely incredible. Completely changed my whole view of therapy.
My university therapist was amazing too. He was the first person to ever say to me, "Thanks for sharing that with me." I now use that phrase in my day-to-day life to respond when people are vulnerable with me.
If they start most of their responses with "at least" and then try to put a silver lining on it instead of honoring your pain and what you shared with them. Edit. My use of the word honor in this context is meant to convey that you take a person's hurt and trauma seriously. Don't diminish or downplay what someone went through or how it affected them. Instead, respect what they've been through and how they got through it so you can focus on healing. Edit 2. Thank you to the people that reminded me of Brené Brown's silver lining it talk. It is the perfect example, much better said, and even illustrated in an awesome YouTube video that helped me put this phenomenon into words.
Damn, I'm not a therapist, but I think I do have a bad habit of doing this when my friends are venting to me. I'm going to knock that off immediately.
Yeah, most people don't want that. Here a 3-step guide to be a good supportive listener. 1. Validate. Wow, that does suck. 2. Sympathize. I'm sorry you're going through that. 3. Empathize. I wouldn't want to through that either. Here is where you can offer advice if they are looking for advice. If it were me, I would do this. Just remember, sometimes people just want to vent and aren't necessarily looking for advice. Do whatever variation of this needed and you will be a happy supportive listener and hopefully make the person venting feel better. Edit. Holy Awards Batman. Thank you so much, lovely people of Reddit.
If they work in a lot of things about themselves and their lives.
You tell a tragic story of something you experienced and your therapist interrupts at the end with, "Shit, that ain't nothing." One time I
actually saw a therapist who had fibromyalgia, and that's pretty much what it was. When I would talk about myself, she would talk about living with fibro, and that's basically what it felt like. I never went back to see her, and I let my psychiatrist know because she referred me to a practice and they kinda just stuck me with someone. That lady said a lot of crazy shit about me being trans, like, I don't usually agree with the whole trans thing, but it seems to be working for you. I honestly haven't even tried therapy since then.
Therapist checks for messages during session. Therapist pushes their own religious views on their client. It's a stupid mistake, but it's common. Therapist discloses content of the sessions to third parties. Exceptions to this rule are consultation, when a therapist seeks a senior or colleagues for technical advice, or when patient's life is at risk. Therapist flirts with client.
Number 2 resonates with me. Tried going to a therapist during university. During the first visit she asked about my religious beliefs and scoffed when I told her I didn't find any of the arguments for God's convincing. And then she implied that was a cause of my difficulties. Needless to say, I didn't go back.
If they keep validating that it's okay you feel the way you do, but offer no alternative way of thinking.
Keep in mind that a lot of therapists won't challenge thinking until rapport and trust is built. At the beginning of therapy, you both are strangers, so therapist validating you and working to understand the problem is an important part of the process.
Super important. I know someone who deals with trauma-related issues and is highly therapy averse. They finally got into a therapist's office a few years back and the therapist questioned them aggressively and then wrapped up the session by declaring, "So you were abused as a child, right?" Needless to say they are still suffering, and will probably never again reach out for professional help no matter how bad it gets. All relationships are trust-based. A shitty therapist assumes that their profession creates that trust automatically.
If they start pushing their religious beliefs on you.
I go to a clinic that has a ton of Christian therapists. They advertise as offering religion in their therapy on request only. So my therapist on the first visit asked if I wanted spiritual guidance or religious incorporation. I'm Christian, but I said no. I've had enough of other Christians giving me heaps of shit for my problems. He has never brought up anything religious since then and focuses instead on cognitive behavioral therapy and meditation, self-awareness, as well as giving me weekly practical homework. I've made huge progress and now only need to see him bi-weekly now instead of weekly smiley face.
When your therapist is sure that you told him things you never did, and hold those things against you. Had a psychiatrist like that once, glad I got a new one. The things she held against me made me look like I was actually crazy.
She never held anything against me, but my therapist has thought I told her things when I didn't and insisted she's never heard of things, people that I've mentioned multiple times.
Therapist here. My role is a little different as I am a trauma-based, short-term crisis therapist, meaning I just help stabilize my clients to where they can be transferred to a lower level of care. To me, warning flags are: no risk assessment, no crisis planning, no exploring triggers, no plan to help you cope when faced with a trigger, especially important when triggered in, out of session, no timeline for treatment, no discussion about your rights as a patient. Too much advice giving. I call this could've, should've, would've people. Also giving advice about anything outside of their scope of practice, medical treatment, religious practices, legal issues, etc. In family, couples sessions especially, any therapist who acts like a referee to determine who is right or wrong. Covering these items are important in therapy because it will help the patient long-term in processing emotions, using healthy coping skills and problem solving on their own. I can't speak to those clinicians in private practice because I'm in community mental health, but for agency-based therapy, it is not a long-term service. Most CMH agencies are bound by EBP, evidence-based practices, which are time-limited and short-term, 6 to 12 weeks. I would be wary of a therapist who seems like they are dragging out your treatment. The goal is progress, not perfection.